Two teams, Texas Tech and Kansas State, are figured to be towards the top of the Big 12 standings when it's all said and done. But today, we're going to play devil's advocate a little bit. We're going to talk about why they potentially might not be towards the top in one of the craziest conferences in college football, right here on a Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Texas Tech. Chris Level here with Christian Rao. We are bringing you in a great episode for you today. We're going to talk a little bit of just Big 12 madness. I think that's probably the best way to describe this one, because this game coming up towards the end of the season, it's in the second half, could be, in my opinion, a potential Big 12 game of the year. It could define the season for multiple teams and not just the two we're going to talk about today, and maybe potentially could host one of the teams that find themselves in the college football playoffs. We got plenty to talk about, but we're also going to explain why, if all of the hype between these two teams are legit, but then at the same time, we're going to talk about why they might not be. We'll dig into that on this episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Chris, Texas Tech has had a great offseason. I think there is no doubt about that. When I immediately think about Texas Tech, the first thing that comes to my mind this year is, man, they were not afraid to spend money. And what that means, does that mean that they bring in a huge transfer portal class? Does that mean that they bought the talent into it? Without being disrespectful to this kind of conversation, did they bring enough in to win the football games that are needed to win this conference?
Yeah, Christian, I think they tried to take advantage of the rules that were in place prior to the House settlement. And yeah, they may have invested more than some, and I don't know if they Texas Tech scenario late last year was that they were so close. They beat Arizona State, they beat Iowa State. Those are the two teams that played for the conference championship, and I think they were one win away from a spot in Arlington, and so I think that's part of what plays into this. And I think they went into the portal window. I mean, the head coach, Joey, he told me and others, we're going to take about 8 to 10 kids in the portal. That was their plan. Maybe one or two more, depending on. But I think as they got into it, I think his comment to me was, we just couldn't turn down the production. And then you had donors going, so this is what we can get? Yeah, let's keep going. And so they did. And I think they tried to pretty much address every single position on their team. And in fact, they did. They addressed every single aspect of their team with production or age, experience, and all that stuff, other than interior linebacker. Everything else was touched in some form or fashion. And the bulk of the, you ask about, like, did they get enough to win the games that they need to? The bulk of this attention, half of this class are linemen. The portal class. You're talking 2 to 3 new starters on the offensive line, 4 starters on the defensive line. Like, totally just like, this is our new defensive line. And so some of the guys that would have started that were internal are now going to be like top backups, or were slightly injured and are going to be brought back. But anyways, so the depth up front on both sides, because this is why they weren't good enough to make it to the Big 12 title game last year. They just weren't good enough up front on either side of the ball. So that's really – so we'll see. This doesn't guarantee you anything. I have no way of knowing if they've gotten enough, but they've protected themselves because of injury and all those things. So – in Kansas State, they dabbled in the portal as well. I know there's a familiar face that Red Raider fans will know in Jerron Bradley, but you tell me kind of what their portal class was like, or their intentions, or kind of what they ended up with.
Yeah, I mean, both teams you and I both finished 8-4. I guess 8-5 for you this past season. But when you look at the transfer portal, what the biggest thing that I took away from it was, you had a bowl game against Rutgers. You thought that you were gonna have a hard time finding momentum because you started so strong. And I'll get to you. I'm guessing for you it was the TCU game where you were just like, man, I really wish we would have had that one last season between Texas Tech and TCU. You guys lost by a point last year. For us, the game against Houston, the wheels fell off, and that's where it really started to change shape. And it was really tough time for us to find momentum. But that was not the case. It really, this offseason, retention was a huge asset for Kansas State. They kept the players that they really needed, and then they added some very good players, in my opinion. And much like you, a lot of players in this portal class that you get to pay attention to and that probably will have an immediate impact is going to be on that offensive line as well. And Kansas State's been known to have a great offensive line in the past. And now they're going to have a new offensive line coach here. And I think he's doing an absolutely good job, at least so far on the recruiting side. I want to get into that in just a minute because he's in your neck of the woods doing some work. But I like some of the offensive lines that they've brought in. I like that the Terrence Enos of Pittsburgh. I really like what he brings. He's got some size. He's exciting. JB Nelson, honorable mention, all Big Ten honorable mention from Penn State, who arguably Penn State has been cooking some of the best offensive lines in the country over the past few seasons. He just kind of got worked out of a spot. Doesn't mean that talent level's anywhere. I think he's an NFL caliber type lineman, and he falls in the lap of Kansas State and Manhattan. And he's probably going to be starting right guard week 0 against Iowa State in Dublin. So a lot of exciting things there. But yeah, you mentioned Jared Bradley, former Texas Tech wide receiver, played at Boston College last year, didn't have the type of production that he was hoping to have last year. There was some rumors that potentially he was either injured or there was some sickness issues going on. But what have we've heard from in the spring about Bradley and about his size and just his motor? I'm quite excited about what this offense could look like for Kansas State this season.
You mentioned Dublin, not to switch this conversation up, but this is wildly fascinating to me. You guys have, I know you and Nick that does Locked On Iowa State have had various conversations. This is a wild scenario to me from the outside looking in. This is a massive game.
Oh yeah.
Take me through, like, it is, because it's before anybody gets going, and it's somebody's going to have, you could argue, one of their biggest wins of the year, and then somebody's going to be like, oh golly, but we still got the whole season left to go, so we got to, do you like this? Do you and how did it come to be? Was this? I know there's money attached to enticing these two institutions from the sponsor, and the Big 12 is kind of involved. I think TCU's doing this next year, playing North Carolina over in Ireland, which is a non-conference game, which I think is a bit different. But take me through just that dynamic with your fan base. Are they embracing this? Are they like, oh, this is not, I mean, I don't know. I'll quit talking, yeah. But you kind of go over that scenario real quick with me.
Well, I think it does tie in and correlates to actually our game November 1st as well, because you're right. If you don't get a hot start in week 0, which is crazy to think about. When I think week 0, I think like UNLV and Hawaii are playing. I don't think that you're getting Iowa State and Kansas State right off the bat. If you don't get to start off strong here, the wheels could fall off immediately. Before anybody else even gets a chance to play football, you already could be 0-1. And then heading into a tough Big 12 conference this year, by the time you get to Texas Tech on November 1st, there's a potential that you could already have 2 losses on the docket, and you're battling for the chance of maybe potentially being out of the conversation for the Big 12 standings. I mean, there was a 4-way tie last year for 2 lost teams in the conference. That's basically how it shaped up. So I think it's a huge deal. The way it got there, I'm assuming it was money. I'm assuming that was a big deal. Obviously, the Big 12 making a big push. We've seen a couple of conference games in the past there. Northwestern played at Nebraska, I think that was, if I remember correctly, in the past.
Well, and last year it was, I think, Georgia Tech and Florida State, if memory serves.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So next year actually will be quite different since it'll be non-conference. So, I'm excited for it. I think it's a really great opportunity to shine your brand. And I think it's a smart idea for Brent Yormark doing that as well. Any chance you can get to to make the Big 12 stand out against all the other conferences. What I've seen from the fans across social media, message boards, I would say probably 9 out of 10 are excited. You have the few negative people in there, or maybe the realistic people. You don't know if you want to call it negative. It might be realistic, talking about how, this could be a really bad thing for Kansas State in a team with a roster that has so much potential, but maybe not, trying to set in and be ready to play Big 12 football right away. Like most other teams in the conference, you get a chance usually to play a couple non-conference matchups, sometimes even FCS opponents to start your season. In this case, we're playing the runner-up of the Big 12 champions last year, a team that just lost in the Big 12 championship, won their bowl game, the Pop-Tart Bowl, in Iowa State, who is a very tough team to start the year before anyone else does. They are the first game on the docket in week 0. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I do think we can take care of Iowa State. I really like the transfer additions he brought in, but kind of swirling into what we were talking about, and we'll get to it at this next segment. If they lose to Iowa State, that could be one of the biggest reasons why they're not a Big 12 contender, because I think the wheels could fall off super early. And that might be a good sign for you over at Texas Tech when you guys come to head to face us in Manhattan on November 1st. So I want to tie that in. I want to get into actually what would happen because everybody's saying the Texas Tech is going to finish towards the top of the Big 12, if not the top. I see your name all over the place when it comes to preseason top 25, even though, finish the season 8-5. I see Kansas State there as well. But for us to be maybe outside, for us to fall off there, what needs to happen? Let's get to that next right here on this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Texas Tech. But first, Chris, we got to talk about FanDuel. That's today's sponsor. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball, under the lights, golfing on the green. I mean, golf's got to be nice in the state of Texas right now. High stakes soccer action. FanDuel is the best way to get in the game. It's more exciting. If you're already following the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and a fun way to bet. I mean, I have been getting really into golf, not actually outside doing it. I probably should, but watching it on TV, the PGA right now, it's been very exciting to watch. And I can't say that I've ever said that in my life. That might be the first time I've said PGA golf exciting in one sentence. So FanDuel's been helping me be really excited with that, picking like the top 5, top 10s. Pretty fun stuff. Whether I'm placing the same game parlay, watching a bet ride into the 9th inning for baseball, Paul Skeens of the Pirates has been super fun to watch for me as well. FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And they got this awesome deal, Chris. I mean, the interface is exciting. The app, I think, is so fresh. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So are you a baseball fan? Who's the team you're riding with?
Yeah, Rangers. I grew up in the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, yeah, semi-struggling a little bit, but hopefully they can get it turned around, maybe make a trade at the trade deadline.
Yeah, the trade deadline is going to be absolutely wild.
Yeah.
And you can check that out, all that good stuff with FanDuel, see if they can hit their finals, their win totals. That might be an interesting one because I think that line might shift once those trade deadlines are done. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, $5 bet will get you $100, $150 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Christian Rao here with Chris Level in this Locked On College crossover. And look, everybody likes to talk about these teams being towards the top of the Big 12. I have been talking about it this entire offseason. I truly believe that Kansas State is a contender. I think there's a couple other Big 12 teams also in the mix. I think this is going to be a really exciting season for the conference. And look, if anything of last year explained to us when it came to the Big 12 media polls, Arizona State was predicted to finish last, and they won the whole dang thing. Well, they're not going to have a Big 12 media poll this year. They're decided they're going to go away with that, maybe because of that reason, because of the fact that the media was completely doubted. They picked them last, and they proved them wrong. What's your thoughts about that? What's your thoughts about the Big 12 media poll going away for the preseason poll?
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll ever I don't know if you'll ever see a team in these power, I guess what is now the Power 4, like a team picked to finish last win it. I don't know if you'll ever see that again. That may be a unicorn scenario. Okay, so no media poll. I've been around this league since, or covering it in some form or fashion since 2002, I guess, and gone to media days, a dozen times and all that stuff. I always found it interesting that the preseason media poll, you would get like 68 votes one year. The next year it'd be like 110. Some years it'd be 80. Some years I wouldn't get the ballot, and you had to fax it in. It wasn't on it was very bizarre, process, the way that they put this together. And I think at some point most people just didn't participate. So I never thought that was a true view. Although it's the one that everybody points to, it's the one that we all reference. It's the one that coaches reference. It's the one that coaches are asked about. They're not asked where they're picked in Lindy's or Athlon's or by Phil Steele or by Andy Staples or, I don't know, insert writer or outlet here. That's not the one they're asked about. It's like, hey, preseason media poll, because it's this supposed consensus. So I don't have a problem with them saying, hey, we're just going to punt. We're not doing this anymore. But if they were going to keep doing it, I wish that the process would have been better. The ballot would have gotten in more hands. There would have been more like an electronic way to do it. It would have just been in more inclusive to where you had a real feel for what people thought. I am always fascinated by the coaches, the way they vote, because I think that's an interesting that they know, and they're not allowed to vote for their own team and all that stuff. So that one's an interesting one. But Christian, if we're being honest, I wish they'd just do away with preseason polls to begin with, because this is part of the Big 12's problem. Like, you're starting out the season and almost every year with one arm tied behind your back because the USA Today and the AP, if you're not already inserted into certain spots, or your teams, like BYU is a prime example from last year. We're talking about Arizona State, but BYU is a prime example from last year. They kind of came out of nowhere. They had this monster year, and they didn't win the Big 12, so they didn't control their own scenario, but they had 11 wins. But I think a lot of people were just kind of had their mind made up and going, we thought they weren't going to be very good this year, so we're really just not. They just had so much to overcome, and I think that's a problem for this league, because you're sitting here hoping that you're going to be as high ranked as possible in the real preseason poll. But as far as the Big 12 poll, I don't necessarily have an issue with it because of the reasons I stated, because I just don't know if it was a true read on what everybody truly thought, and not everybody was participating, which, it was frustrating.
Yeah, you're right. And you talk about, it's what everybody talks about. I can remember, right? Like, as we talked about, Arizona State is like the huge narrative for the conference, how they finished last in the preseason poll, but won the entire Big 12. 2022, when TCU went to the national championship game, this is when we had less teams in the conference, but they were projected to go, I think, to be seventh in that one. That's the year Kansas State won the Big 12, but TCU wound up getting their butts kicked by Georgia in the national championship game. So it's just wild to think of, what they have everybody projected to be. And then we talk about it all the time, but as you just mentioned, kind of opening up the door, it's very unscripted. It's very unorganized. So it makes a lot of sense why they might get rid of it. But here's my question now. We talk, your team every day. We're talking at least 5 days a week about your team. When these preseason stuff comes up, what are we going to talk about now if there's no preseason poll?
Well, fair question. Because it is something. It's part of list season, right? It's just one of the next things in line, and it is something you can officially point to. I think that maybe we would, whenever the coaches, that's the one that we would maybe point to the most, because that's separate. That's not the one that necessarily the Big 12. Maybe that is the one that the Big 12 will actually send out. They're still going to do. Because even like if you get into this even further, like they're still going to do the preseason all Big 12 teams, and they have a spot on there for a fullback. They have a spot on there for, I don't know, like only 2 receivers when almost every team out there's offense, is like starting 3 or sometimes 4. Not everybody utilizes a tight end. You see what I'm saying? It's like those are even kind of a bit tricky and not necessarily modern compared to the way it used to be. But again, I digress. I'm not trying to complain about everything. I'm just kind of stating the facts there, in that it's a bit goofy on some of those things. So there'll still be some things we can talk about. Christian, like because I whenever I've done shows like this or radio interviews or whatever it is, and it's like, hey, where does Tech's place in the Big 12? Who do you think? How would you pick it? I'll just very, very transparent here. The Big 12 folks, the Locked On folks, we try to put together our own. And I think my poll that I had was, I think I had Arizona State 1, I think I had Kansas State 2, and I had Texas Tech 3. I have stated repeatedly, I think Arizona State deserves to be picked to win this thing. They won it. They have their quarterback back. They have a top wideout back in the country. Their entire coaching staff returns. A lot of those players do return. They may be battling complacency, but I think that's my opinion. I think they deserve the right to be picked first. And I've stated Kansas State second. I think they have a lot back. I think there's a lot of street cred for Chris Kleiman. And then I think with Texas Tech, again, they weren't bad last year. I mean, they were really good, and they beat some of these teams that played for the deal. And they've added, according to everybody else, they've added legit talent, production, and all those things. It's just a matter of Texas Tech, can they put it together? Christian, if I ask you, Texas Tech won't be in Arlington, I want you to tell me why they wouldn't be. Like, what would be the pitfalls? Plural. You can take that list as many as you want to on the various reasons. So what keeps you up at night?
Ooh, if Texas Tech isn't in there, or if Kansas State doesn't?
No, I'm asking you about Kansas State.
Okay, good. All right. First off, I will say I agree with all of what you said about where I think they should be in our preseason poll. Arizona State deserves to be number 1. They won the conference, I think, where you set off to be going. I like what you said about 2 and 3. I really do. To give my actual answer about where I think Kansas State would be and why they wouldn't be in Arlington and like click the break glass in case of emergency, I'll give you that right after this. A little Ryan Seacrest right after this break. You know, when you watch American Idol back in the day and they were getting really excited about like who's going to get eliminated, and they give you right after. I just threw a little Ryan Seacrest at you. How about that? That's the first time I've done that on Locked On.
Marking that off the bingo card there. Did not have that on there.
But yeah, I was ready for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Why would Kansas State not make it to Arlington? That's the question that we're going to ask to finish up this segment here on the Locked On College crossover. Well, look, for 2 years in a row, Chris Kleiman and Kansas State have gone 8-4. You know, if you're going to say what's going to happen, I think the easiest conversation, not talking about injury, because I think that's just the scapegoat of this conversation. I think that the easiest answer would be Avery Johnson does not take a step up in year 2 behind center. I think that would be the easiest answer. You start off the season 7-1 last year. The wheels fall off in Houston. You end the season 8-4, and then you have an exciting comeback win against Rutgers in a Rate Bowl game. Matt Wells, if Matt Wells, his new offensive coordinator, his new system that he's going to install that's going to be focusing heavy on play action, you know all about Matt Wells over at Texas Tech. I'm hoping we get Utah State Matt Wells, not Texas Tech Matt Wells. And with that play action type of performance with Avery Johnson, I'm hoping that in 10 years down the road, when we talk about Matt Wells' legacy, we don't talk about how he was a great coach for Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. He was what he did with Avery Johnson of Kansas State to make him the best quarterback he possibly can be. That's what I'm hoping for. But the reason that Avery Johnson might not succeed in this break glass in case of emergency scenario is maybe the Matt Wells situation, the scenario, the project doesn't work out. These wide receivers, although their size is something that Kansas State has not seen in quite some time, maybe don't pan out. The running back game, missing out on DJ Giddens, who's now in Indianapolis. They focus more towards speed of Dylan Edwards. Can that hold off? Can that be a longevity issue? Dylan Edwards is a small running back. So again, I don't want to use injuries as a scapegoat, but you have to think, like, can he run 12 straight games as the running back 1 for this team with his size and stature? So I'm going to go with the offense. I think it's 100% the offense if they do not make it to Arlington. I feel comfortable enough with what they've added on the defensive side and the transfer portal, and honestly what they're bringing back. I think the secondary brought in a lot of great transfer pieces. I love our linebacking core. I think Austin Romaine is probably one of the most underrated players in the entire country, and they brought back some great defensive trenches as well. I think the offensive line gets it done. I just think it's the skill side of the offense that has to click. And if that doesn't happen, I mean, I think you could be looking easily at another 8-4 season, Chris.
Yeah, and for Tech, I as an outsider, I think a lot of it points to Avery Johnson. But heck, man, a lot of this points to a lot of the QBs in this league, and this is the best collection of returning quarterbacks in the country in this league. I mean, because in some years, some of these guys that are thought to be like the 5th, 6th, 7th best quarterbacks in the league would be like the 1st or 2nd.
When's the last time you've seen this? I don't mean to cut you off, but when's the last time you've seen this in a conference where we're talking about some of the teams that we're projecting to finish like 12th have a quarterback that could easily be a top quarterback in a conference in different years?
Honestly, it was it was back like in the late 2010s. There was a time frame when, like Texas Tech had Graham Harrell. I think you're talking. Texas had Colt McCoy. Oklahoma had. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but because they had a stretch there where they just had so many. These were draft picks. Yeah. And like you could not even make the 2nd or 3rd team of the Big 12, and you could be like, statistically, like one of the best in the country. That's just kind of the way it worked. I think this year it's that there could be a variety of draft picks coming out of just the Big 12 conference. I mean, I think people think Sam Leavitt could have a chance to be a pretty high end pick. And then there's some of the potential pieces. I mean, look no further than to when Tennessee lost their quarterback. I know that, tampering is illegal and you're not supposed to do it. Give me a break. But like Tennessee started when they needed to replace their guy Nico and they were without a quarterback. Who did they started calling? They called Kansas State. They called TCU. I think they called Arizona State. I mean, not that they called the schools, but they were trying to shop in this league as far as QBs go. And what's interesting, you mentioned Coach Wells. I'm still talk to him all the time, buddies with him. His brother Luke is now on that staff as well. And this is like the butterfly effect. It's just kind of fascinating. But like Matt Wells and his staff are the reason why Baron Morton is here. There are, I guess, because of that, they are the reason why Sawyer Robertson is not here. They made the choice. We want Baron Morton, and we're only taking one. Sawyer Robertson was right here in Lubbock, Texas, and he didn't have the best workouts whenever they went to go look at him. I think they thought very highly of him, but they had to make a pick, and they picked Baron. And so Sawyer Robertson goes to Mississippi State. Now he's back in this league, and now obviously Matt's coaching Avery Johnson. So just kind of a butterfly effect a bit there. But as far as Texas Tech goes, like on reasons why they may not end up. Can you take this many? And it's not like this isn't Colorado-esque because this isn't like 50 new players. This is basically 21 or 22. So I think some of that reasoning has been overstated. However, you're going to count on a lot of these new guys immediately. When adversity hits, what's it look like? Is it like, okay, we got a bunch of hired guns, or are they still willing to play hard for each other and play, and work toward a goal, or do they check out? I mean, I don't know this. I think that's Joey and Barron and everybody's job that was here when all these pieces started coming in is get immediate buy-in. So that would be a part where. Because at some point, adversity is going to hit. I mean, like that's just the way this sport works. Nobody's rolling through this thing undefeated. I mean, I don't buy that. And I would say, Christian, that I think a 7-2 league record is the minimum you could have to get to Arlington, and that may not even be good enough based on tiebreakers. So it may require an 8-1 or a 9-0 conference record to ensure that you get to go. And so the chemistry, the culture. that part, it's an intangible that you can't really reach out and touch, but that would be a reason why. You mentioned like your new offensive line coach. I think that's been an underreported aspect of this Texas Tech team. You have two new coordinators, one of which was by your choosing. You replaced your defensive coordinator. You brought Sheil Wood in from University of Houston. They had a top 25 defense at U of H last year. He brought a player with him, and it was bad here last year. I mean, they were ranked in the 120s, and yet they still almost made the Big 12 title game. So what if they tried out there a top 50 defense? What if they improve? What does that look like? But they also have a new offensive coordinator because their OC last year is now the new head coach at Florida Atlantic and Zach Kitley. So Mac Leftwich comes in. This is going to take some time. These schemes. What do you want from me? What's my role? I mean, all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that I think you can't really rush. You just, until you see it, it's a question. Until you kind of say, okay, I think we're starting to figure it out. Is that mid-September? Is that late October? I don't know when all of that clicks. So that would be some of the things that I think that would prohibit Texas Tech from not reaching their goals here. But I know the Iowa State game in Ireland. Texas Tech shows up in Manhattan on November 1.
Yep.
What other games, and where does the Tech game rank amongst your, like, if you're circling right now, this is where this is going to be decided, these 3 or 4 games. What are the other ones that are there?
I would put Tech as 3. That's where I would put Tech as number 3 on the list for games that matter. And really it's just based on where it's set in the schedule. Number 1 for me, I think, is Baylor. Actually, I think the Baylor game in Waco is going to be really tough for us in Kansas State. And then I'll put number 2 of the week 0 Iowa State game just because of where it's at. It's the opening game. If you don't start strong, it's going to be a tough one. So that's my top 3 teams of what Kansas State's really needs to focus on there. The end of the season, though, is still really interesting for Kansas State's schedule as well. You got to go to Stillwater, and then right after that, you got to go to the Utes, both on the road. You can't tell me that both those teams are going to be as bad as they were last year. And then you finish the season against Colorado, which I potentially think that in week 12, we could be thinking about maybe a 5-6 Colorado team coming into Manhattan fighting for a potential bowl bid. So I think there's a lot of storylines with Kansas State's schedule that make me a little nervous. I'm not going to lie to you.
Isn't this league fun? I mean, everybody looks at it as like, it's not that good of a league. The other leagues that puff their chests out, but you're making great arguments because it's, you mentioned Utah.
Yeah,
I guess 2 or 3 months ago, when I'm looking at the schedule for Texas Tech, and I guess up until that point, it was always the Arizona State game in Tempe and the Kansas State game in Manhattan. And then Vegas starts to, set some odds, and then Phil Steele comes out and is like, I got Utah winning this thing. Granted, they're tied there with the aforementioned Baylor and some of these others, but it's pretty apparent that Utah, there's some thought that they're really going to bounce back. And I'm with you. I don't think a Kyle Whittingham coach team or Mike Gundy coach team, and maybe they will. Maybe they will be as bad. And maybe this is the point we're watching it happen in real time where they just kind of lose it, like they can't get it back. But I think they've earned the right to go, watch out. And so that's Texas Tech's first conference game. It's in Salt Lake City. It's September the 20th, I believe. And now I'm looking at it going, it's in that group of 3. It's not just those 2 games. It's that other one. You get BYU at home. I don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be with everything going on there. Their other 2 road trips are Houston. Watch out, as you guys know. And then you on Thanksgiving weekend, you go up to Morgantown and play Rich Rod, which that could be a team that
they can have it figured out by then.
They could, or they could, because I think a lot of people feel like they are one of the worst on paper. But what will they be at that point? Will they be, 3-8? Will they be 7-4? I mean, I have, no way to know, but they are clearly not on paper anyway as talented as some of these other teams that we're sitting here talking about. But yes, the Kansas State, Arizona State game and the Utah games, all on the road, those are landmines for you without a doubt. And just makes it kind of fun because and the margins in this league, it's going to come down to one win for everybody. Like it's going to be, it's going to be right there. And so you show up and don't have it one day, that may be in the one that got you. And that's why I think playing 9 conference games is the way you should do it. And some of these other leagues that only play 8 are soft.
Yep. Only big boy leagues can play 9 conference games, Chris. We know that. We know that's the case there. Look, I'm with you. I think that 2 losses in the conference might not get you to Arlington. I think 1 loss will probably guarantee you a spot there. But I would not be shocked in any way, shape, or form that if we have another one of those crazy 8-way tiebreaker conversation episodes the week before week 12, as we're going up to it like we did this last season. These teams have to win, and all the other 6 teams have to lose for you to get a chance to go fight for Dr. Pepper. Like, I can totally see that stuff happening once again. Chris, thanks for joining me on this Locked On College crossover. Where can everyone find you and Locked On Texas Tech and all your great work?
Yeah, well, Casey Cowan and I do Locked On Texas Tech every day. We've worked with him for the last 3 years, and we both did radio at the same station for the last 17 years prior to that. So, yeah, we both live in Lubbock and enjoy it and eat this stuff up. Christian, and I'll say that you're just crushing it with what you do with Locked On Kansas State. Been a great addition. I know you've been at it for a bit, but it's been awesome to kind of watch you take that thing and kind of flourish with it. Tell Coach Wells that I said hello. And other than November 1st, go Wildcats, right? EMAW, right? I think is this. Am I doing it right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There you go.
Oh, I forgot. I have to ask you this. A couple of my comments came in when I was talking about Texas Tech. Is there a bad luck feel about Tech coming to Manhattan?
They have, and we'll talk about this like leading up to that game as it gets closer. Sure. When we do our normal thing. Yeah, they've only and Matt Wells has been a part of this, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't gone well for Texas Tech in Manhattan. No, it's a bugaboo. I think the last time that you've won up there, and granted, there's some of these years where you haven't played. I think it was like the Mike Leach era back in the mid to late 2000s. It may have been like the 08 season. I have to go back and look specific. It was around 07, 08. It's the last time you've won up there. And again, you're not playing there every year, but yeah, it's been a minute. But you've been in a lot of these games, and it's like a missed kick or an unfortunate, untimely penalty. Or, I mean, when Coach Wells was at Tech, you went up to Kansas State and you had, one of the best kickers in the country from the year before on your team. And I think that there was like 2 missed 30-ish, 35-yard field goals. And then you have a close loss. I mean, it's just kind of like chalk it up as like, geez, man. So yeah. Now that's the one good thing, Christian, about all these new pieces. They have no idea about any of that. They don't. That's the one way I've argued that, like, some of these new pieces, they don't have any of that scar tissue. They don't have any of this, like, this program, that had anything to do with us, So I don't know, but that's clearly a thing, and it's something I will definitely talk about for sure, because you always have a hard time winning in Manhattan. Absolutely.
We're going to have plenty to talk about. We could have made this episode an hour. Once November 1st rolls around, that week leading to, we're going to have to meet up again and get a closer kind of snapshot of where these two teams are, hopefully still battling for Big 12 championship contention. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been a Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Texas Tech.